Hey everyone, Chris, thank you for that introduction. So yeah, as Christine mentioned, I'm from Indiana, grew up there my whole life. Just a few months ago, moved to New York City for college. But in the past few months, really since spring of my senior year, I've been working with Mental Health America National, as part of their Youth Policy Accelerators program. And we've been working on really pushing out youth peer support and how we can better address youth mental health through youth peer support programs. And then a couple of months ago, Chris reached out and said they were trying to put together like a legislative forum on youth peer support. So of course, like it's really exciting for me. It's something I've been working in quite a bit recently, trying to expand on a federal level. So to get the opportunity to try and go back and work on it at a state level back in Indiana is really great. And I'm excited that you all are here and interested in participating in this forum. Hopefully we can get some good to come from it. We'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to go over some of the slides that we worked on for um, the Youth Policy Accelerator with MHA National. Um, so this is kind of a presentation we put together to talk about what youth peer support is, just as an introductory thing. And then also just mention a little bit about that program as well. So youth peer support is something that the Youth Policy Accelerator has really been pushing. The Youth Policy Accelerator, which I'm a member of, is a group of young adults 18 to 25 that are working for MHA National to try and promote youth peer support on a federal policy level, at the state level, at their own schools, just kind of across the board. So here's some of the other members that are on it alongside me. And then kind of the objectives we're going to be going over through this presentation is going to be understanding an effective youth peer support system and what it can look like in different settings, because that's one of the really great things about youth peer support is it can be kind of tailored to the specific situations it's trying to address. We're also going to be looking at different model programs that have already been working across the country with demonstrated impact. And then we're going to be looking at some of the policy mechanisms that we're able to use to convince legislators that this is something worth kind of pursuing. So without further ado, just a brief intro to youth peer support. So peer support in itself is kind of a category within mental health, and a peer is anybody we can relate to through shared lived experiences or aspects of identity that can be anything from age, gender, cultural background, sexual orientation, and any other types of identity. When just kind of instinctually as people, when we face difficult situations, we often turn to people who've been there before, people we can relate to for advice, or just somebody to talk to. And that's kind of all about what peer support is. And in youth peer support specifically, it's typically one young person to another young person. So this is just a little quote from research on youth peer support that we found kind of insightful. So it says, people who share common experiences or face similar challenges come together as equals to give and receive help based on the knowledge that comes through shared experience. So that's really what youth peer support is all about. And then, like I mentioned earlier, youth peer support programming is really a framework, more so than it is like a specific, strict program that is kind of like a one size fits all type of thing. So it comes in all sorts of different forms and settings, but overall, that all youth peer support programs are support provided by young people with lived experiences. And then it's also based on shared understanding, respect, and mutual empowerment. And it's a non-clinical kind of approach to mental health care, but it is complementary to professional services. And then one of the really good benefits of it is it can reduce stigma around mental health and increases help-seeking behavior. So it can increase the likelihood that young people are open to seeking help from professional services. And it also can create authentic connection in the areas where young people already are. So it's not forcing them to go out of their way to get mental health care. And youth peer support isn't like a single program, like I mentioned. It's all sorts of different forms, all sorts of different clubs and settings for that. So this is just kind of a graph that we've used to show um, how you can go from like a wider level of youth peer support down to kind of narrow, more specific settings. So ideally, we'd be in that kind of smaller blue bubble there, but it's kind of a progression that you work towards. So you can start out by training young people with general support skills, say QPR training,
You're cutting
um,
out just a little
different
bit.
things like that.
Oh,
That um, um, okay. Um, it's Are we all good now? Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay,
Just
thank you.
maybe explain the slide again.
Yeah. So what we're kind of looking at here is a graph that shows um, kind of on a wide level, the most basic introductory levels of youth peer support, all the way down to a more narrow specific level. And ideally, we want to work towards that kind of light blue circle there, the smaller one. But it's kind of a progression. You start from the bigger circle and work your way towards. So in that bigger circle, the dark blue, it's looking at training the youth to just have the general skills to be able to properly communicate with each other about mental health, know what to do in situations when a peer comes to you talking about mental health, and then also just general wellness education for youth. And then the next step, kind of in that orange bubble, is specifically going to where young people spend their time. So that's like schools, community organizations, internet-based sites. So like that can be social media, that can be iMessage group chats, anything of that sort. And then the smallest circle there, that light blue circle, it's looking at embedding peers into youth serving systems. So that's like having peer support provided through mental health services, having youth mental health spaces. I know a lot of you mentioned you work with mental health clubs in your schools. That's an example of what we're talking about here. And then also just other youth service systems. It's a very wide umbrella of different clubs and groups and organizations that can be working in schools or in community organizations to provide youth peer support. So that kind of level one, some examples of, so that bigger dark blue circle we just looked at, some examples of that are here. These are different organizations and programming. So you have like the YAM, Youth Aware Mental Health Programming, you have QPR training, mental health first aid training, the support network, and then ASK, which is acknowledge, support, and keep in touch, a kind of model to follow when a peer comes to you to talk about mental health. And these all really focus on building mental health literacy. So that's like your general support skills, uh, peer-led mental health education, and just overall working towards a culture of support. So that second circle, the orange one from that graph with the bubbles, what we're kind of looking at here, different organizations are sources of strength. Some of you may be familiar with Project Let's Erase the Stigma is another one. And then here's just kind of an example of like a university club. They're also prominent in a lot of high schools, like mental health clubs, clubs where students are able to come together and discuss mental health or try to build a better environment for youth mental health. And these are really focused on meeting youth in the areas where they're spending their time. So that's like I mentioned, school-based clubs and organizations that can be online areas through like social media, text group chats. There's Discord servers for it, anything of that sort. And it's also interest and activities based kind of events or organizations that promote positive mental health culture while also allowing youth to spend time doing something they enjoy. So that can be like playing video games, playing sports, art, music, anything like that, like an interest-based activity that is promoting mental health care as well. And then that smaller bubble there, what we call level 3 is embedding peers in the systems. So that's getting peer supporters into healthcare systems. So like youth can access peer supporters wherever they are. So these are like dedicated physical space-based peer support. So that's like in programs where that's provided by their schools, like there's a room in the school where students can go to meet with a peer supporter and just have a safe space to talk. It can also be in health services and settings, or other youth serving systems, which can be a really wide umbrella of things under like the social services, foster care system, juvenile justice system, all that kind of umbrella. And here's a few different programs that are working to do that around there. So when you're promoting youth peer support to kind of adults, that can be school administrators, that can be legislators, really anybody in charge, they can be a little wary at first because they're unfamiliar with it, or some concerns will immediately pop up. So this is just kind of addressing some of those main concerns that we have adults voice to us pretty often. So one of the main concerns we hear is like liability and risk. They're worried if they let youth lead programs and have the kind of youth peer support where there's not a like adult professional in those one-on-one conversations. They get worried that that could go poorly. So youth peer support will always have proper training and supervision frameworks to avoid that from happening. So there is like a trained adult who knows what they're doing, ensuring that these programs are running smoothly and that the students who want to be peer supporters have the proper support and the training on how to approach situations. And again, this isn't like clinical professional care. This is really just being a friend and having open, honest conversations with somebody who you can relate to. And then another concern that they'll bring up is staff workload. So they're afraid that like whatever adult gets put in charge of this program, that's an entire new program that they're going to have to run and operate, and that can really increase their workload. Or for the youth who want to be peer supporters, they're already balancing other extracurriculars in school and academics and everything like that. And this is just adding one more thing on top of all of that. But what the research has kind of found on youth peer support is that a well-ran, well-implemented peer support system can actually reduce the burden on teachers and counselors within schools. And it can also increase student self-reliance and empowerment. So students will no longer feel like they have to go to a teacher or a counselor for everything. They now have a peer they can talk to, and they start to build the ability to solve problems for themselves, which is helpful for the students in particular, but also the adults in lowering that workload. And then another big question is, even if you do convince them, if they're like, yeah, we want to do this, this sounds great, but how do we do that? Like, how do we get the funding for this? How do we implement this program? So I'll be talking about that later on different pathways for funding to make this work. And it's also something that I think our legislative forum is going to be trying to work towards, and getting our state legislature to provide some funding to allow schools across our state to implement youth peer support systems. So this is just kind of going over some of the data and like research that's been on youth peer support and what that data is showing us. So just kind of broadly, we see an increase in self-efficacy in students. So that's the ability to kind of be a self-starter, solve problems you're facing on your own, or know where to go to solve the problems you're facing. We also see empowerment and social connection and recovery and hope in students. And we also see a pretty significant decrease in depressive symptoms, rehospitalization rates, time spent inpatient, substance abuse, suicide attempts, and everything under that umbrella. So youth peer support has a lot of promising research backing it. And then here's some kind of headlines and data that we found showing different youth peer support programs that have been implemented and found really high levels of success. So sources of strength is a big one. Um, you can see up here, it was opened in 20 different high schools over 18 months, and this study kind of focused on it to see the effects of that, and it like had a really, really tangible impact in the schools it was opened in. Together All, which is a digital space for youth to connect and have a peer support programming there. And it's been found to have statistically significant improvements in symptoms and mental health. And then Active Minds, well, the more familiar people are with the Active Minds framework and what it can provide, it can increase in perceived knowledge around mental health and mental health care, and it can decrease the stigma around that as well. And it can also increase in helping behaviors. So that's kind of connecting with your peers and helping them through situations that may arise. So this is a point that we really tend to bring up pretty often when talking about youth peer support, is that young people are going to look for peer support no matter what. Like that's just the natural, instinctual kind of thing. We're going to turn to our friends and have those conversations with them. So youth peer support programming really looks to just make it safe and effective. So here's a little bit about what the YPA has been doing in kind of our federal advocacy for legislation. So we've been getting some bills presented to Congress to try and promote youth peer support. Hopefully in this next session, we can get some progress made there that could really have positive impacts in Indiana. And also, we're fighting for Medicaid billing for peer support in schools so that can allow public schools to have youth peer support systems and get funding for that. And what we've been doing as youth policy accelerators has been meeting with legislators. So that's something you guys are going to get to do here soon for the forum. You'll be able to meet with legislators and talk to them about youth peer support programming and kind of your experiences with youth mental health in the school systems here in Indiana. And then another thing we've been working on is like releasing different toolkits and presentations like this one I've just gone through on what youth peer support is and how youth peer support can be implemented. So this was a survey that the YPA did recently, where we polled all sorts of people working in youth peer support all across the country. And only 23% of people who participated in the survey said that they felt like their community understood youth peer support. So that's really kind of the biggest problem around peer support is people don't really understand it because it's something that's a little bit newer. So it's really just trying to promote understanding and get the facts out there. And typically they'll tend to see it as a really positive option once it is fully understood. So these are kind of some funding streams that schools and organizations can take advantage of to promote youth peer support systems. So like I mentioned earlier, in certain states, they allow Medicaid billing for youth peer support programming, and that's really, really effective in getting those programs in schools. Community partnerships, so getting different businesses and organizations in the community to provide funding for youth peer support programs is a good opportunity to get the funding for it. And it can also come in the form of grants and private donations as well. And then what we kind of want to work towards with this legislative forum is encouraging our legislators to talk about having grants from the state government for schools to implement youth peer support programming. And then different, what we call pipelines. So this is once youth peer support programming is implemented, kind of the effects you're going to see of it later on. You see community safety and violence prevention, suicide prevention, substance use prevention, it can introduce um, it can introduce systems that will address mental health disparities. Like a lot of areas in rural Indiana can really struggle to access mental health care, and this would be great at addressing that. And then it's also workforce development for these students who um, participate in youth peer support systems. This could allow those students to discover they really have a passion for mental health care and start to learn what a career in that could be like. Um, so this is just kind of something we added to the end of the presentation to let people know what they can do to try and promote youth peer support. You all, by participating in this legislative forum, are already taking a really big step in doing that. So thank you. But some other things, if you want to still go outside of this and promote it, a really big one is encouraging your peers, other young people, to get certified in there's all sorts of different trainings on just how to be a better youth peer supporter. I know one pretty accessible one is QPR training. You may be able to talk to Christine or Brandy about getting QPR training through MHA, Wabash Valley region. And then just find out different groups who are doing youth peer support in your area. This could be like school clubs if there's a mental health club at your school, or community organizations who have youth peer support programming. And then just kind of try and spread the word with your administrators, counselors in your school, other students that you meet that you think could be interested in this. And then just to kind of end off, there's my email. If any of you want to reach out with any questions, you just get in touch, feel free. And yeah, that's all I've got for you on youth peer support.